Welcome back to the Audible Angle. We're covering NCAA hoops today. We're going to come at you hard and fast. Get right into it. No long intros, as some of the listeners hate it. Proven right on Vandy. Big time success in the Calcutta. Right about every team we talked about so far this year, so it's really going to be a highlight episode. We're going to start off with a quick story, and this isn't boring, I don't think. I don't think listeners will get turned off by this because it involves hands in the pants, into skin contact, male and female sort, in public, at a bar, between strangers, folks. It happened today. Shout out to someone I can only assume is a fan of the show, because that's the only thing that makes it make sense. Let's just say similarly aged blonde woman at Broadway Pizza. I'm trying to get a meal with the fam. We finished up our meal. This gal is very securely in the druzy zone, like for sure in the druzy zone. And Irby's laughing already. That's not the punchline, Irby. That like the good druzy zone. Anyway, in the good druzy zone. We're departing. Obviously, I didn't notice it. That's my radar is a little off. Didn't notice it. She had to be eyeballing me. Ladies are in front of me walking out, and my lovely bride says, "Did you grab your card out of the little pamphlet that the bill came in?" Because I'm a frequent forgetter of that. So they keep walking. I turn back to the table, and I kind of reach over and I grab the thing, and I'm kind of flipping it around, moving the receipts around, make sure I grab my card. Alternatively, I could have just checked my wallet. Looking back, that would have been another option. I hear a female voice, one that I don't recognize, behind me say, "I'm just going to do it." Boom. And I didn't think it was coming to me. I'm just kind of total back turn, minding my own business. I think I'm just going to do it. Boom. Hands in my pants. Skin. Yeah, go ahead, Irby. You got a question?
Your pants.
My pants. And not my hands. Her hands.
Front
in my
or
pants.
back? Front or back?
Let me finish the story. You might be sniffing it out, Irby. And I feel the skin-to-skin contact. It's skin-to-skin inside the waistband of the underwear. And then I feel the yank. And it was the back of the pants. And she just reefed up the pants and underwear over the exposed butt crack from when I'd pounded a lot of pizza and then wedged myself out of the booth, shirts a little pulled up, and turned my back. I guess our table is kind of by the ATM. That's why she was there. And it's just funny because I heard her say that, and I was kind of like, that's kind of weird. I didn't really jump or anything, but all of a sudden just boom. Like her fingers are, if you see on the video here, they're like in there, and then her thumbs are on the outside, and she gives a full yank. I can still feel the sensation of where her hands were. And I just said, "Oh, thanks." And she said, "Yeah, you just had to do the right thing." And I said, "My wife and daughter will appreciate that." And then I get in the car, and I tell the gals, I was just, a woman put her hands down my pants, and my wife she's just hysterically laughing for a while. And then I kind of turn back to Josephine in the back. I'm like, this is how your mom reacts when a strange woman in a bar puts her hands in my pants. And she's just still laughing. She goes, "Yeah, but she's going the other direction. She's pulling them up, not down." And just started laughing and laughing. The guy's like, this is what it's come to. I can't even get a hands in the pants story out with people laughing at me. I mean, because I was baiting it as if, it was some kind of uncarnal knowledge of a man on the premises. Or carnal, I guess uncarnal, it was uncarnal knowledge of a man on the premises was the wager. And so she's at the ATM because I didn't really know she was sitting at the bar, but she's like the end seat on the bar. I assume it's her because there's like a phone sitting there and a drink, and then like three friends. So I don't know if they had scoped this situation out. You know, sometimes when you're sitting in the booth, like maybe from the side, my shirt, they could see a little skin this whole time I'm eating, and they were thinking, look at this fat ass. Oh, he's jamming another slice of pizza in. God, man, help this son of a bitch out. But all right. Has that ever happened to you guys? Can you console me at all? Make me feel better? Have you ever had a strange woman come up to you and say, look, buddy, nobody's plumbing.
I don't know if we want Druzy to answer that question because we know that answer is yes, and we know that it's not a G-rated conversation. But Drew, let it rip.
The whole time I was just thinking, I got to get to this pizza shop. It sounds like a pretty good place to hang out. So see you there next Thursday, Friday for the games, Dilly.
Well, and remember this is.
And I'll leave my suspenders at home.
This was Sunday afternoon at 2 p.m.
That's even more
fun
impressive.
of an environment. Yeah, wouldn't want to be there Saturday night past 10. You never know what could happen. Back to NCAA hoops, guys. We're filibustering a little bit because we have the start of Utah State getting ready to try to take down Arizona. And why do we care about Utah State? We completed the big Calcutta auction Wednesday night. Made some right moves, made some unscheduled moves. As you might have been able to predict, we picked up some SEC teams. We're always big on the ACT, SAT. What the hell's the difference? SEC. Great conference, great basketball. Druzy, you had been kind of an auxiliary partner in some of my past Calcuttas. How'd you like the experience, and any highlights? Just a quick wrap. I'm sure we'll bleed it into our overall discussion on the NCAA tournament so far.
Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed myself and kind of doing it virtually with you guys last week. I think, my takeaway was, for the most part, it's interesting. We talked a little bit beforehand about strategy and teams we may have liked and teams we didn't. And I think, my takeaway was, boy, in an environment like that, you got to be nimble and be willing to adjust, because it's just, as things go along, strategies change. Some teams are valued more than others. And it's interesting to see the room play out and how, the personalities of the room and how people might view their strategy versus our strategy. So there's a lot that went into it, a lot of learnings. Definitely glad I participated. And hopefully we still come out on the positive end on a couple of these.
Irby, what were your thoughts as we were going through the process Wednesday night?
Well, first things first, Dilly, there is absolutely no rhyme or reason for what anybody bids on what any teams are, and I don't know what other strategies were, but I will tell you it is the wild, wild west in that particular Calcutta. But I will tell you that the Audible Angle crew had a good plan. You're right, Druzy. That plan adjusted very quickly after the first region went through, and we had our eyes on a couple of regions. Frankly, looking backwards, I think we're pretty smart, and we're sitting pretty good in that one region specifically that Arizona and Utah State are working out. If things fall the right way, could find ourselves in the grade 8 with a couple of squads still live.
Yeah, and we will divulge here that we did look at the West as a possible chaos bracket. So we took a couple extra shots in there in the West and ended up with Texas, Utah State, High Point, and Arkansas all doing battle out there. So by the time we had a guaranteed Sweet 16 team before things were concluded on Friday. So that I think on Friday, Arkansas, we knew Arkansas was going to win whenever the hell they played. Oh, yeah, they played Friday. In any case, it's pretty good strategy. One other thing, just because I was on Thursday evening having some beers with the representatives of a couple other teams in the Calcutta, I will say there were some shared viewpoints with what we had, and just general dynamics of the Calcutta, and I would maybe guess this is a lot of Calcuttas. There's some bigger spending bigger investing teams, maybe bigger groups of guys as part of that, and then there's a strong mid-range, and then there's straight value shoppers. And the interesting thing is, whatever region you're in, whatever zone you're in, you could say, well, we're not going to get involved in skyrocketing prices on Duke and Michigan, but there's other teams that have a similar strategy and are looking just invest a fair amount but look for value. Then you end up just bidding against those guys too. So there's no easy street to just go, I'll just take all the low seeds, get them really cheap and hope for an upset, because there's a couple other teams that are kind of just in it up into that point too. And then that's how you get some of that early stuff Irby was talking about, where it's like, Cal Baptist, boom. Why is there 6 guys bidding on Cal Baptist? Nobody actually thinks they're going to win, right? And hey, they were kind of close. Let's get into some specific game matchups. We're not going to be able to go over everyone. Probably a popular game for our listeners. For some reasons, I mentioned it because of the order of the Calcutta and how things work out. We ended up with Arkansas before Wisconsin was even up for auction, up on the board. So knowing how it played out, if we would have had advance notice of what everything was, we might have ended up with Wisconsin. But the fact of the matter is we didn't. We got Arkansas before they were ever up. And part of our mindset, because we had Utah State too, we thought might as well grab High Point as well. So full disclosure to the listenership, I believe on our pregame show, we had Wisconsin, probably had Wisconsin maybe further than Druzy was comfortable. But in the real world, in Calcutta world, we actually took High Point early. Irby, I'll go to you first this time. As representative Badger fan, how were you feeling throughout the game? High Point, Wisconsin.
Dilly, I think this is an interesting game for the Badgers. I do believe, watching a lot of basketball over the last 4 days, that basketball game itself was a very good game. We expected a good game. You and I, Druzy, we were on High Point to begin with. We knew High Point wasn't going to be a pushover. We knew this was going to be a competitive game, and that's what it was. At the end of the day, I think Wisconsin doesn't win this game because they didn't make the right decisions in crunch time. It's probably the last 2 minutes. Not sure what we were doing in the last possession. I think we probably could have got a better shot with a different individual. I don't question Greg Gard. I want to kind of quell that. I don't question his coaching. I do question a little bit because I think he's a very successful coach and will keep Wisconsin relevant. He showed it this year when we weren't expecting a lot. But I will tell you, I think he slipped up a little bit. I'm going to bring into question. I think he allowed Boyd to make too many decisions when a college kid shouldn't be making those decisions. I get it. He's emotional. He's been here before. And I understand that he's made a lot of those shots that he missed down the stretch. But a coach has got to be a coach. And I don't know if Greg Gard down the stretch was. I'm not saying he's a bad coach. I'm saying that I think he let one slip away. And if he looks back on it today, he's probably questioning some of those decisions when he needed to make a decision as a coach. Boyd's a great player. I don't know if he's going to be a great pro, but he's a great college player. I think Blackwell as well. The future is bright right now, depending on what happens to some of these players that are going into their senior year for the Badgers. One of the issues we don't have is head coach. Please stop that narrative. That head coach is a good head coach. He can get kids to play. He's proven in the transfer portal. It was a good game, Dilly. We didn't come on the right point, on the right side of this. High Point did. They're a good team that gave Arkansas a run as well, but we knew that going in.
Druzy, how did you feel about High Point throughout the game?
Yeah, Irby had a lot of good points. I think we called a lot of what happened in that game, minus maybe the end results on the angle last week. We thought High Point was going to be gamey. They're a good outside shooting team, and so they hung around. It was interesting. High Point made that run at the end of the first half. I think it was a 1-point game at half, if I remember correctly. And then right in the next 3 or 4 minutes, those first couple of minutes of the second half, Wisconsin grabbed like a 6 to 8 point lead, and it pretty much stayed there for almost the majority of the second half, and I felt like, Wisconsin was maybe going to be able to get an extra 6-0 spurt or something and put them away, and it just kind of hung around that 6, 8, 10 point range, and High Point did just enough to keep it in striking distance because, heck, I think it was even 6 points there with just over a minute left and 4 points under a minute left, and man, High Point just kept chucking threes, and eventually they got hot at the right time, like Irby said, and hit a couple in a row. It was a great game, but for the Badger listeners and Badger fans, it had to be somewhat shocking because I felt like they were somewhat in control for most of the game. But that's what March Madness is all about. High Point did enough to hang around, and in the end, gave themselves a chance to win.
Yeah, I don't know if it's part of just having, they have the point guard real quick. Probably isn't a guy that when you get to, although Wisconsin has a great backcourt, but when you get matched up in the best teams in the country, I think that guy would have played the same way the whole time. I don't know if it's just his experience, kind of player he is. He was going to get to the rack, and he wasn't, even though he's a small guy, he was either going to make something happen. He finished a lot for a smaller guy. Being in communication with a lot of Badger fans, I wasn't hyping the fact that technically I was pulling for High Point. I didn't want to get out over our skis too early, but my takeaway kind of throughout the game and halfway through the first half, I just had the feeling that High Point wasn't going to go anywhere. They weren't get down 6, kind of like you said, Druzy. It did kind of seem like Wisconsin was going to kind of have a 6 to 8 point lead and kind of feel secure, but they kind of came back a little bit in waves. But there was always another wave. You see some of these other games in teams, the underdog, so to speak, will come back, get it down to 3 or 4, and even Duke TCU. Don't want to jump ahead of our scheduled programming here, but they keep it close, they come back, and then it just seems like it's just one too many times that a team hits 2 buckets in a row, then gets a turnover and a foul call, and all of a sudden it's 7 again, and you kind of just feel like, well, that was their last chance. And with High Point, I don't know if it was body language or whatever it was. It just seemed like, I never felt like they were going to cave.
High Point, I'll be honest, Dilly, High Point was the higher motivated team. It looked like because of kind of what you and Druzy explained was that the game was under control. It seemed like the Wisconsin Badgers were kind of in cruise control. And then it just didn't pan out that way, and it looked like there was a lot more want to on the High Point side than there were on the Badgers side. I know that's probably a reach. I would guess that that's not the case. That was perception. I think the difference in this game is how Boyd in the first half scored 7. In the second half, he scored 20. In the first half, Blackwell scored 20, and in the second half, he scored 2. We did need a little bit from Blackwell, a little bit more in the second half, I think, and that would have been different. But one guy that was non-existent, and I think we saw rust, I'd like to hear what both of you thought, was Winter. He didn't have a great game. He didn't play well. He was the biggest guy on the court, but he looked like he was lost at times, definitely in the first 4 minutes of that game. And I would argue in the last 10 minutes, he was a non-factor, and we needed him to be a factor. I'm not going to put this loss on John Blackwell alone. I think he and Boyd kind of share that for their first and second half kind of performances for each. Opposite mark, but I think that this game kind of boiled down to what Rhodey and Winter didn't do.
Yeah, agreed, Irby. And in fact, maybe that emphasizes my point earlier. I think that's why I thought Wisconsin eventually would maybe get to a 10, 12-point lead and kind of put them away, is because they had more size and they have more depth, as you typically see with, Power 5 schools, bigger conference schools versus like your mid-majors is size and depth. But give High Point credit. They hung around and kept it close, and, hopefully I don't trample on your future material, as you would say, Dilly, but it was almost the same in the Arkansas game, except for Arkansas was able just to kind of hold them off, but like they didn't go away the whole game. It was very similar other than, maybe the last 2 minutes.
Yeah, just the way the timing worked out in that game. Another 2 to 4 minutes, and that thing might have just jumped right back to being close again, because Arkansas a number of times seemed like they were going to kind of shut the door, and again, Calcutta disclosure, we had Arkansas and High Point, but even then, you kind of wanted Arkansas to win if you're us, because that's the more likely team to put up a fight the rest of the way. I'm going to do a quick audible here. We lost Irby here, but, he'll just jump back in when he's ready. I'm going to do a live check-in here. A team we talked about having question marks on was the not – Irby, we're switching to a live look-in here. The not Tony Bennett Virginia Cavaliers on the ropes here against Tennessee. We don't want to pat our backs too hard, but we will only on the games that we get, things we got right. Forget about stuff we got wrong. Tennessee, are we to be impressed with this if they finish this off, Irby?
I'm not going to say impressed, because I don't think Virginia is that good, and we were on that, as you stated. I mean, actually, you didn't explicitly say it, but that's where we're at. We thought Virginia was a little overrated all year long. I don't think they're a true 3-seed, Dilly. I could honestly see them as a 6-seed here. I don't think Tennessee is good enough to be a 3-seed, certainly, but this result won't surprise me. Obviously, there's 11 seconds left, and anything can happen in March. But this is a game that we kind of saw, and this is why we talked about Iowa State having kind of an easy road into that Elite Eight, because they were going to play the winner of these two teams. I thought maybe Miami of Ohio would give Tennessee more of a run than they did. That game turned out to be a nothing game. But I'm not overly surprised in Tennessee taking, but it's more about what Virginia isn't than what Tennessee is.
Druzy, talking again about Virginia quick here as we do a live adjustment to the script. That Virginia and Wright State game, Wright State was a game that we out of the Horizon League, we didn't highly regard Wright State. We didn't really think that was a place to look for an upset, even though we didn't like Virginia. And that game was pretty tight up until a little late pull away by Virginia. Should that game have let us know that Tennessee might advance here?
Yeah, 100%. I think the writing was on the wall. I mean, Wright State was actually looked like the better team for 75 to 80% of that game, it felt like. Credit to Virginia, they did what they had to do in crunch time. Maybe some experience of playing in some higher pressure games paid off there. It's not surprising Virginia pulled it out, but they didn't look great doing it. And, as far as Tennessee, Dilly, I feel like, and we talked about this last week, it depends upon whether you get good Tennessee or bad Tennessee. They've been so inconsistent all year. Some games they look great, and some games you just say, what's going on here? They shouldn't even be in the tournament. And so far they've been good Tennessee, albeit with, and we mentioned this before, I think a fairly favorable draw, all things considered, getting a Miami of Ohio team that had to play an extra game in the first four. But credit to Tennessee. They've actually looked pretty good here through 2 rounds.
As we continue the live look-ins, and we'll get back to this one a little later, Iowa leading a lot of the first half, hanging tough into the second half. We did basically, I don't think we ever strongly endorsed Iowa this year, but our endorsement was basically they're tough and ugly, and they're in the Big Ten, so it's not a game anybody looks forward to, and maybe Florida is learning a little bit about that as they pull ahead 41-37 with just under 17 minutes left. We'll get back on the script here, though. North Carolina versus VCU in the first round. That game did go to overtime. It's one where in the first half I thought, classic North Carolina, kind of classic big conference, big reputation school. They're kind of a down year. Important player injured. And you kind of think, yeah, that's ripe for an upset. All of a sudden, they're carrying a big lead through the first half and into the second half, and you think you got it all wrong. Then VCU comes back. Were you able to watch that one, Druzy?
I think it was 19 points at one time, I think, was the lead for North Carolina. And I'll be honest, once it got to like 8 or 9, I felt like it was like VCU was going to get it done, and once it got to overtime, I really felt like they were going to get it done. It just looked like North Carolina had, unfortunately, I mean, I don't have anything against North Carolina, but they had just become unraveled, and they couldn't recover. And I think maybe the injury in the end did play an important part of that. But VCU looked good. They also expended probably a lot of energy in that one and got the doors blown off them in the second game. But yeah, North Carolina did not look great. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Hubert Davis and his future with that program.
Did we explicitly get VCU and North Carolina right, Irby?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we talked about VCU being ripe for an upset there just because of, again, North Carolina not having their big scorer. I mean, that was kind of the nail in the coffin early. North Carolina, I'll be honest, Drew, it surprised me they were up by that many to be in the middle of that. I thought VCU was a battle-tested team, and that was it was a North Carolina team that's coming from a conference that really didn't push them that hard, right? And you saw during the regular season that they weren't great against the tougher teams. VCU, you're right, Drew. They ran out of gas. They didn't have enough. I don't think either one of those two teams were going to have enough for Illinois, so that kind of shook out the way we thought it was, Dilly.
Did Illinois, were they able to show us anything this weekend with two very strong, easy, now, nothing's easy, but convincing victories, or did they benefit a little bit, secondhand benefit from North Carolina being a weekend? And does it change your viewpoint on them, which I believe, if we talk about the audible angle viewpoint, is they're good, not 100% consistent. We don't know exactly what we're going to get. Was this just a case of good Illinois shows up and we'll see what you get against Houston?
Well, it's a really good question, Dilly, and I don't think, I'll go on record tonight and tell you that I don't think the first two round matchups, round 1 and round 2 for Illinois, has done them any favors in their matchup coming to against Houston here in the Sweet 16. That's probably the best matchup, in my opinion, right now on paper. That's going to be a game that everybody's watching. I'm not sure what time that's at or what day that game is on yet. I don't think that is determined until all of the games tonight are complete. But that Illinois-Houston game is going to be really physical. I think Illinois is going to get punched in the face. I don't think those two games did them any favors for their next matchup, Dilly, because it's going to be faster, it's going to be more competitive, and they're not going to be the highly favored team in that game.
Druzy, did Illinois do anything for you to build them up as a possible 3-seed runner? Do they get past Houston?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Irby had to say, but, I mean, you got to give them credit. They did what they had to do. They didn't mess around. They didn't play with their food, pretty much putting the game away in the first half, hopefully able to rest some players so they probably didn't have to play some of their key guys as many minutes. So we'll see how it plays out against Houston because, to Irby's point, that is going to be a great game. If you're going to put me on the spot now, Dilly, I would slightly favor Houston just because of their toughness, but Irby's right. That appears to be, we still don't know all the matchups yet, but appears to be maybe the game of the round of 16.
Little programming note, as Druzy mentioned, us putting them on the spot for picks. We did bank our Bridge Up Brewing, Keep It Local episode with Coach from UW River Falls soccer program. We're going to get that out early in the coming week after we get this wrap out, kind of our breather period on Tuesday-ish, as we try to fill the void on Tuesday and Wednesday before the NCAA tournament cranks back up. And then likely, time permitting, we will get some more actual previews of upcoming games, a little more focus on the previews. Let's get back on track here. A big matchup for us, and maybe this one, longtime listeners might actually. I feel like some of this was in conversation. Like we liked BYU, we didn't like this skid that they had in the middle of the year. We didn't like their health. We still kind of liked them. We ended up liking Texas, and they were our team in the Calcutta during our West region run of just let's get all the teams. Irby, we'll talk 2 Texas games here, but How'd you feel, Texas? What did Texas show you against BYU in that first round matchup?
I mean, Texas, specifically in that first round matchup, Dilly, was their athleticism. Texas is a really athletic team. They've got a lot of ways to beat you. Their bigs aren't traditional bigs like you see maybe like a Carlos Boozer, tongue in cheek there, the Boozer big boy. They're not an Arizona big guy. They're more athletic. They're a little slimmer. They're faster. They run. They've got some dynamic guys in the backcourt as well. So I saw a more athletic, hungry Texas team against BYU. And as you stated, we were kind of after that, right? Like we thought that BYU wasn't going to be who they were with that leadership with some of those injuries that they had, and they kind of proved that they were going to lay an egg. Texas had just enough in that first round game. And unlike what VCU did in the second round, they had plenty for the Zags too in the second round.
Yeah, I mean they. I got my big men mixed up in the pre-recording phase of the show. I don't know if I'll say this right. We'll just call him Volky, big white dude. Like when you say classical big men, I did catch a portion of this one audio only while I was driving, and the point of the game in which I listened, Gonzaga. I think it was, I can't remember which guy it was, but hit a three over him, and they were kind of talking about how he's a big guy that doesn't want to defend the three. He's maybe not the quickest of foot, but Texas was able to kind of keep that big advantage down low where they needed it to be, and let a guy like that stay on the court, keep scoring points, and keep dominating the boards. Druzy, were you watching that one? How excited were you for Texas round one?
Yeah, I would echo a lot of the things Irby just said. Texas, outside of their real big guy that you had mentioned, Dilly, have a couple of 6'7", 6'8" guys that are kind of long and lanky, and they're tough to get around. Good defense, and Texas, to me, maybe a little bit of the same thing we talked about with Illinois. Probably a little bit more of a favorable draw there. Getting BYU without Richie Saunders. DeBance's the real deal, but it felt like he was almost on an island by himself. And then getting Gonzaga without Braden Huff as well. A little bit fortunate maybe, but you got to hand it to Texas. They were tough. They took advantage of their situation, and they are officially in the Sweet 16.
Yep, I might have been blending my stats there. He didn't quite dominate the boards as much against Gonzaga. That was the three-point shot. Ike was who was dragging him out deep into deep waters. Who gives a shit? Same story. Both wins. We were concerned, maybe Druzy and, both you guys were a little concerned about the Gonzaga. It's a different Gonzaga team than normal. They get the 3 seed. But are they facing a team like Texas very often during the season with that kind of athleticism and just a bunch of guys that can play ball? Do you think anything will change? Maybe this is a bigger topic. Is anything going to change with scheduling as we get into this quad 1, quad 4, get your wins in, get your team ready to play these kinds of matchups? Does Gonzaga need to make a change, Irby?
Hey, you know what? I actually, in the lead up to the NCAAs, I actually went back and I looked at who Gonzaga played this year specifically, Dilly, and I was not impressed with their non-conference schedule. Drew, I don't know, Dilly, if you did the same, but I was like, man, I remember Gonzaga loading up in the non-conference, with playing like the Michigans, the Michigan States, the Illinois, the Dukes, really Florida, testing them on these different tournaments in over the holiday break tournaments and doing all that stuff before conference play starts. They didn't. I think maybe they had 3 or 4 games, but then they had 2 games with like Tennessee and Virginia that there's like, are they really top 25 teams? They're not top 10 teams. I questioned Gonzaga's non-conference schedule this year specifically. In years past, I did see them play big teams. This year, they didn't. Mark Few didn't schedule as aggressively. Maybe that is because he didn't expect their team, but when you come into the tournament 30-3, you think you're decent, but when you take a deeper look and maybe peek under the covers, maybe he didn't like what the toenails looked, to be honest.
Yeah, I'll tell you, maybe just a wild speculation here, but we're old guys, and we've been through 15, 20 years of the Zags being the most interesting team out of nowhere. And, maybe in years past, going back a couple of years, maybe longer, maybe they felt less pressure to mix in tougher matchups to prove themselves because they're an established name now. A little less pressure to take every road matchup against whatever SEC or Big 12 team or Big 10 team that'll play them, just because they've been there a little bit and done that before. Quick live cut in before, and it looks like everybody's looking at the TV. Iowa did stretch it out, and Florida scored again. They're at the free throw line, but Iowa up 8, free throw pending. They're hanging on here. Irby or Druzy, we're going to you first. If you're a Florida championship guy in your bracket, or gal, of course, maybe you spent a bit, invested heavily in Florida in your Calcutta. How worried are you? Imagine being a Florida guy right now. How worried are you?
Yeah, I'd be pretty worried. Looks like is it back to 9 here? And this game is, this is like an Iowa game. It feels like it's Iowa blueprint. They kind of mucked it up from the start. It's kind of been a choppy game. There was almost a fist fight, early in the game. One guy looked like he threw a punch. Guys were on the floor. That's Iowa DNA right there, is to kind of slow it down and make it ugly, and I think it's taken Florida out of their game. So scale a 1 to 10 panic factor is probably like an 8 or 9 right now, I'd say, if I was a Gator fan.
Irby, you're a big social media guy, like we all are, constantly social media. Did you see the pictures? And there was more than one dude. Did you see, the biggest dude, the Florida fan that was at the game with the tree trunk arms and legs? And then I saw, as I scrolled just for 1 minute, then there was like a different dude, damn near as big as that dude, also at the game, Florida fan. Your thoughts on the size, width, and tenacity of tattoos and look of Florida fans? Should Iowa be concerned about escalating any on-field or on-court physicality?
Yeah, I think that maybe Iowa feels comfortable because of the pace that the Iowa fans would have, but I don't know if they want to get into a scrum, so to speak. When I saw a couple of those pictures, that's pretty solid stuff by Florida. I'm pretty sure that there might be some drug usage in a some way, shape, or form that some of the old Packer players, maybe Tony Mandrich comes to mind, that he utilized back in the day. May have picked that up. But I will tell you, Dilly, Drew, I agree. I think this Florida team is built different than the national championship team last year. So this year they should not. They would be worried if they were down 9 right now, soon to be 10. Now it's 10 with 12 minutes left. They don't have a 3-point shooter that can bring them back quick. This is a very concerning midstream here in the second half. If you're a Florida fan, if you're a Florida championship fan, big trouble here because Iowa will slow this down.
No Walter Clayton is definitely a factor.
Now, Druzy, as Herbs is our social media guy, you're our social guy. You're out there in the wild, perhaps more than either of us.
Yes, sir.
At the bars, establishments, Mississippi Muds. Thanks for sponsoring the program. You're out there pulling tabs with the best of them from time, all legal and for charity. This isn't a big thing. I know he pulled a big one. Congratulations. When you see dudes like these Florida fans, I'm going to go back to these big dudes. I don't know if you saw the pictures, but just imagine the biggest dude you've seen and then do about 185% expansion on that dude. When you see these big muscular guys with tattoos and maybe you're eyeballing the same cougar out there, do you think it's all egg whites and whey protein, or do you look at these guys and think, hey, you're cheating the system, man, and overall, we're trying to lift us all together, and you're bucking the system with these, perhaps, as Irby states, illicit aids in masculine profile?
I have to admit I'm unaware of whichever large individual you're talking about. Are we talking like Ronnie from Jersey Shore type thing, but times 100, or like, or just like I'm assuming this is like the most unlikable guy in the world, where if you saw him, and you knew you weren't going to get killed, you'd slap a protein shake out of his hand, but you'd get twisted into a pretzel at the same time.
Are you familiar with Eddie Hall from Strongman Competition and other crazy shit?
I don't think so, but I'll do a Google quick here. Is that really what we're? So this is like serious.
I assume do a quick Google search of Eddie Hall, because I don't think they're super tall guys. I would have said Brian Shaw, but he's a much bigger and stronger man. More like an Eddie Hall build with, I assume, zero of the athleticism, just the muscle, no functional.
Large human, Eddie Hall. Yes, sir. 362 it says here.
Yeah, these guys were about 6 feet, about 362. That sounds about right. If it came down to it, do you worry about that, or is that just kind of powder puff muscles? It's not functional strength like you have.
Yeah, it's powder puff muscles. We with the three guys on this show, we just get them with our superior quickness and agility, which is all you really need in that case. So I'm perfectly comfortable.
I mean, all I got to do in that kind of setting, just turn my back to a lady, and their hands will be in the pants, man.
I was just going to say, go at the crack. That's all we need.
Draw them in however you need to. Sometimes muscles and fitness and good looks, sometimes exposed crack. We got another game to get into, folks, before we get off the rails. Irby's getting intent on these games happening live. We got, that's a replay, St. John's in Kansas. Not going to that game yet. We got TCU, Ohio State. Another close matchup. We're kind of highlighting a little bit of unexpected stuff. We don't have to talk, although we could talk Duke Siena. Siena, hell of a run. We've seen it before. Played them tough. Good for you. LIU, Arizona. Not a lot to talk about there. TCU, Ohio State. Did Ohio State let us down, Irby? Let the Big 10, Big 12 matchup, something we talked about a lot. It was a good game.
Yeah, it was a good game to watch, Dilly. TCU didn't do any surprising for any Wisconsin fans. TCU took care of Wisconsin early in the season. It wasn't close from the tip. So we knew TCU. I knew TCU was a strong team. Liked our pick there in the Calcutta. Also, I will say the one thing that scared me, and I said it, there was some senior leadership from Ohio State that was really looking to make a wave here, and they fell a little short. One of the better games, first-round games in the tournament so far, obviously. That was fun to watch. And I'll be honest, TCU did a pretty decent job of going toe-to-toe with Duke for about three-quarters of that game, and I'm not sure why it got out of hand. I think we should touch on that a little bit later. Drew, you and I were sharing, and Dilly, you were on that as well. You were kind of quiet on it. But there were some questions in the refereeing in that Duke game that I think we should talk about as far as big picture.
Jersey, let's just transition right to it. You were watching TCU Duke. It was a close game, and then all of a sudden it wasn't. And, you don't want to be the ref guy, but there's a couple games where it seemed, is it just a case of they got better players doing better things, they're going to draw more fouls, or does it sometimes come down to, refs know who the boozers are. They know who the 1 seed is. They know what's going on. Do they, at the collegiate level, do some of these teams more than, Jordan in the 90s got calls? Do brands get calls in the NCAA tournament?
You'd like to not think so, Dilly, but it feels like maybe it plays a piece, even if it's not a conscious effort on the part of the referees. Like you guys just mentioned, sometimes, like you said, Dilly, the team is so much better physically, like there's going to be a foul disparity. It just is what it is, or a team is sloppy and undisciplined or whatever defensively. Like that's going to happen. I get that. That game was really, really close. It was nip and tuck, and it was physical. And at one point, and I think this is when I hit you guys up on the group text, I think TCU had 10 fouls and Duke had 3, and there was like 6 minutes into the second half. And I said, my goodness, that changes everything. TCU can't play physical defense anymore because now you're sending Duke to the line. They're good free throw shooters for 2 shots, every single time, and it felt like TCU just got nickel and dimed, like it was close, and then pretty soon it was 7, and they were going to the free throw line every other possession. And so I thought maybe the officiating got a little one-sided where TCU was getting hit with some fairly handsy stuff, and maybe Duke wasn't, to your point, Dilly. Hard to say. In the end, Duke's awfully good team. I'm not going to take anything away from them. I don't think it fully determined the game, but, did it play a part? Maybe.
Irby, any stronger takes on that? Not that I'm not trying to elicit it, but I mean, is it reasonable, or is it just disappointing to see? Because it's like football. We talk a lot of football on the show, and it's like you don't want to talk about that one holding penalty. I don't know why there's this pressure to it's not just one play or whatever. But if we're being honest with each other, one play in football, couple trips down the court in basketball can have a great effect on the outcome.
Yeah, I might take a stronger. I want to see better. How about if that's what the strong take that you're looking for, Dilly? I want to see better in these games. I mean, I know it's the NCAA tournament and it's a razor thin line, believe it or not, between a 9 seed and a 1 seed, especially with Duke. Duke was on the rails at halftime. In the second half, it was a very Druzy. It got to like 22 fouls to 7 in that second half. And every time this game, bottom line, TCU didn't have enough big guys, and we're going to joke about that, but they didn't have enough to go against Boozer, and they got into foul trouble in the first half, and that's where this started. I didn't see the touch fouls being called against Duke, and I saw the touch fouls being called against TCU. That's where I want to get it different. The other thing and we'll get back over to Drew because I think you've got another point here, but the bottom line, guys, is I saw too many officiating errors in the first 2 rounds up until this point, not only with the fouls in that game, Dilly, but also with 2 legitimately easy goaltending calls that weren't called, and they were game-changing. That's the difference. I want to be better officiating that are game-changing issues, and that's where I kind of was a little disappointed, especially in that Duke TCU game.
I'll jump in there quick. I know you guys are mentioning where the fouls were at, and this comes straight from one of our big-time advocates and listeners. We'll just call him Hudson Jake. He did get there. This topic of TCU Duke came up in some text chains, and the final foul numbers were cited, which ended up TCU 21, Duke 17. But there always needs to be context there, because if it's at any point 13-3 and 16-5, okay, so by the end of the game they got a couple of inconsequential. When it's out of hand and the gap closes, it's kind of hard to compare the final numbers. It's 20, looks like 23 free throw attempts to 10. Some of that can be gameplay. If you're not taking it to the rack, you're not drawing fouls, but it was a factor in the game. And you had more guys on TCU in foul trouble. And if all those fouls are happening in the first 3 quarters of the game, there's a big disparity. It might not matter. Especially when the underdog is trying to hang with the 1 seed. It might not matter if it evens out in the final 5 minutes. Druzy, back to you.
Oh, yeah, thanks. I just, one more thing on the officiating. I just wonder how much replay has come into this. Like, I felt like there was a couple times we went to a replay and it felt like we didn't need to go to a replay, and it's just like it drug things out, and I just wonder how much the officials are, how much, subconsciously it feels like it has to play a role. If you have replay, does that mean you're not as decisive with the calls? I'm not sure. I just throwing it out there. I don't know one way or another, but it's, to Irby's point about getting better, like, does replay, we want to get things right, but, is there a downside to that too?
Let's get to one more game here. And before, I think, one more first round matchup, and then we got some second round ones we didn't get into yet to clean up. Our friends Utah State playing right now. They did get past Villanova, a team that we were questioning their validity in the tournament, and just the whole conference in general. from top to bottom was not impressive. And we had Utah State take down Villanova. Irby, once again, audible angle correct. Tell us more.
Yeah, I think this isn't one of those things where Villanova just wasn't a good enough team. And add in, I don't think they were playing well enough at the right time. This is a Utah State team that won their conference tournament, deserved to be there. I believe they won that. Yeah, they won that conference tournament. They deserved to be there. I don't think Villanova did. I mean, I look at Villanova as being a poor man's in a worse conference, as exactly with Iowa. We see what Iowa's doing right now to a top-ranked Florida team, and this is just the difference in conferences. Those teams that are third, fourth in that type of conference, that Big East conference, it's a down conference, and you look at what a Big Ten team is in Iowa, who was kind of on the bubble and had to play well down the stretch. Villanova wasn't, and they deserved to lose that game. Utah State's better.
Druzy, thoughts on the Big East so far?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what UConn does tonight, but Villanova's out. St. John's toughed one out today. So a lot of the Big East success will come down to, I think, how far UConn makes it. St. John's Kansas game was a little ugly. But just to recap, I guess the Utah State, Villanova played pretty well for most of the game. You got to give them credit considering we questioned their entire existence, I think, on the last Thursday call. But Utah State, Collins and Falslev are as good a 1-2 punch as there is, and I think those guys combined for something like 45 points or something, so they looked impressive. And I think at the end, to Herbie's point, Utah State was just better, so Big East or not, it was Utah State coming out on top.
Yeah, it's
Here's
one of
the
those
deal,
things
the
too.
difference. The difference between St. John's is they won that conference, man, and they barely just beat a team in Kansas today that was like fourth or fifth in their conference. Come on, man. Like, this is a St. John's team that won the Big East. Villanova didn't deserve to be there. We talked about St. John's. They're a 5 seed. They won the conference. You got UConn as a flipping way higher. Who the hell cares? They're going to lose the next game. Ugh, junk. Big East, see ya.
Big East still junk, and as always, we're proving ourselves correct. And I think really you got to put it a little bit in context here when we're talking about these conferences. It's hard sometimes because obviously St. John's and UConn, they're fairly good, but when you're trying to break down seeding and everything, they're beating up on a conference that stinks. Villanova is their other representative. They stink. Utah State, our guys, down 9 at the half to Arizona. They did not perform well. And when you're breaking it down on, well, what are you really comparing it to? Is like Villanova or Indiana? Who's better? I mean, Indiana is the Big Ten bubble team. Compare it to these other conference bubble teams. And we don't want it to turn into, just SEC, Big 12, and Big 10 facing off in this tournament. Miami of Ohio got in. This is one of those teams, though, that was maybe Villanova would have gotten the nod over Miami of Ohio if a couple different things would have happened in the lead up to Selection Sunday, which just would have been unfortunate. I know Miami of Ohio didn't necessarily, they didn't advance either, but they won their playoff game, they play-in game. Let's highlight one other team that I just don't want to forget about. A team from a very terrible conference outside of teams we've identified as good. Georgia gets their pants blown off by St. Louis. Irby, how shocked were you when you saw St. Louis take down Georgia 102-77?
Not surprised at all. I will tell you, the poor Larry Bird from St. Louis, favorite player in the league, by the way, in the NCAA for St. Louis. Georgia had no right being there, and St. Louis was in the top 25 all season long. They proved they should have been there. Maybe laid an egg yesterday, but who cares? They kicked the crap out of a team from Georgia that shouldn't have been in the field at 68.
Druzy, in the words of Nate Diaz, after he took out Conor McGregor, were you surprised at all when St. Louis took down Georgia?
definitely not surprised. What did surprise me is I was unaware, and maybe this because thinking back to the St. Louis Rick Majerus days, but St. Louis can get up and down the court, man. Like, they were impressive and very efficient offensively, and like Irby said, I love Robbie Avila. The spectacled big man can shoot from all over the place, and St. Louis had some really good athletes too, and that was pretty much a laugher from the start. For my own selfish purposes, I very much enjoyed the St. Louis Billikens destroying the Georgia Bulldogs.
Quick audible here off the script. We do have a matchup pending, a preview, so to speak, of the still a second round matchup. We had a couple teams that we liked the Big 12 conference. We liked Alabama. Alabama had some, we'll just say, personal problems heading into the tournament that scared us off a little bit. And Texas Tech has an injury to a big-time player, and they both handled their business pretty dang convincingly in round one. That's a 4-5 matchup coming up later tonight. We better not still be recording then, because that's another couple hours to go before that one tips off. Who overcomes their difficulties, Alabama, or did Texas Tech prove that, hey, maybe they're a little deeper than we thought? Can they take down Alabama?
I'll take this, Drew. I'll jump in here. I was really disappointed in a Zips team, that being Akron, didn't give Texas Tech a run. They looked good. Texas Tech in that first-round matchup. The pride from Hofstra, not so good for Alabama. Alabama is a very athletic team. That point guard is a stud. The freshman, we talked about some of the depth that Alabama still has. I'm looking forward to this matchup. It's the last game tonight. It's going to be a good game, but I'm leaning heavily towards the Alabama Crimson Tide. They need a football season. This is basketball. I like Alabama. I like their athleticism. Texas Tech is going to give them a run, but I think at the end, by about halfway through the second half, Bama, as long as they're making their shots, are going to come out on top on that one.
Druzy, impressed by Texas Tech's resiliency? Does it come to an end tonight, or?
I was impressed with Texas Tech. I may have underestimated their supporting cast. To your original question, Dilly, and I would say I am much less enthusiastic about Alabama as Irby. Texas Tech did more in the first round to convince me. I think it should be a great game. I mean, the seeding tells us that. Just the athleticism on both teams tells us that, and if I had to pick right now, I might actually lean towards Texas Tech just based on what I saw in the first round. But Ruby's right. I mean, Alabama's got a ton of athleticism. They can score too. I might just lean towards the toughness of Texas Tech in the Big 12 as maybe the tiebreaker here, considering both teams are a bit shorthanded, as we discussed.
We'll do a quick live update here. Yeah, Florida came storming back. They found somebody. Hit a couple threes in there. Yeah, that's a 2-point game, and Florida right now with the lead and the ball. We're at that 5-minute mark. This, if Florida's your 1 seed and your tournament life, you didn't like that shot. Big time air ball. I don't even know that was ugly. Crowd should be chanting it. Don't chant it too loud by those big dudes. We don't technically know if they're athletic at all. This 4 or 5 minute mark is where, if you want to feel good about Florida in a Sweet 16 matchup, this is where the 1 seed pulls away from a team like the 9 seed. But they can't, because Iowa hit a 3-pointer. Iowa back in the lead by 1.
UCLA's already winning, beating the shit out of UConn 2-0 early.
It's over. Zip. UConn stinks. Terrible conference. It's over. Sorry about your bracket. Yeah, a lot of action still to go. We got to wrap on our favorite team, boys. And it is from a conference, much maligned conference, other than Alabama and Florida. We got on our squad the Nolan Richardson-led Arkansas Razorbacks. 40 minutes of hell up and down the court. These guys look good, and I guess our first question is, going to Irby, how excited, how good is Arkansas?
Yeah, great question, Dillian. They're really good. I like the way that team plays. Talk about another athletic team. It's a very athletic team led by one of the best, if not the best, point guard in the NCAAs right now. Acuff is as advertised and had ice in his veins in that game, and I believe whoever comes out of this, it's probably going to be Utah State beating Arizona tonight yet in the second half, strong
Obviously.
second half coming back. But it doesn't matter. Arkansas is sitting there and say, bring whoever you want. Duke, you can come across the brackets and play us. Arkansas will eventually see it anyway, because that team is a team of destiny, in my opinion. Lyle, that big dude, he's got a long kid, athletic kid. He makes some plays for Arkansas. But bottom line, Acuff is that kid. It reminds me, Druzy, a lot of that Walter Clayton stuff last year for Florida that brought him right to the national championship. This guy's not afraid of anything. And it was fun to watch High Point in Arkansas last night when those point guards were like, I'll do it better. You do it, I'll do it better. And Acuff had the last laugh with that three-pointer and said, sayonara, go to sleep. I'll see you in the Sweet 16, Arizona or Utah State.
Druzy, quick live look-in update. UConn getting destroyed early. It's 4-0. Big Ten crushing the measly Big East. Disgusting. And Coach Calhoun is not going to be happy about this one. Druzy, were you at an establishment during the Arkansas game, and did the pace of cocktail celebration quicken as you watched this exciting Arkansas team either night?
Yeah, I'm not sure the pace of cocktails consumption quickened because it was probably slowing down at that point just based on the early Eastern time zone starting of cocktail consumption. But look, Irby had a lot of great points. Darius Acuff is Arkansas is going to have a chance in every game it plays because Acuff, I think, is going to be the best player on the floor. He's unbelievable. I will say, and look, Arkansas played well in their conference tournament, so they kind of check all the boxes of, do we have a stud that can score, get his own shot? Yes. Playing well. They're on a 5 or 6 game winning streak. But I was also impressed with, Arkansas's supporting cast is maybe a little bit better than I thought with Billy Richmond, Malik Thomas, Trayvon Brazil, a couple of long, lanky, athletic guys to get inside too. So I very much like Arkansas. It'll be interesting to see who they match up with in this round of 16, if it's Utah State or Arizona. But I think they're going to have the best player on the floor. And that's Darius Acuff. He's the real deal.
Well, I'm glad you left my guy out so I can bring him up. Malik Ewing, who I'm pretty sure is a nephew of Patrick Ewing, and then he dropped the G because he didn't want the attention. But as much as Irby liked the point guards going back and forth, what I loved is they looked to our friend Ewing when they needed a bucket, and they have a couple guys. They can dump it into the post, and maybe a little bit was the matchup, but they can go and get points and rebounds from a couple different guys. Richmond, 15 and 10, Ewing, 14 and 12. You get a couple of those guys to pair with Acuff. Now you got something, and you can get a bucket. You can get an easy bucket. He had some post moves. Not everybody in the NBA or the NCAA can score down low anymore. You don't see people feeding the post, and I think that's a huge advantage, especially like we talked about High Point. They just kept coming. You just couldn't shake them, and then when they get it down to 2 or take a 2-point lead, they had another reliable way to get a good basket, get a good look. And that's it. That's exciting as an Arkansas owner in the Big Calcutta. Irby, back to you on, before we get our Arkansas Sweet 16 prediction, Irby, how did Vanderbilt do in the NCAA tournament this year?
That's a really good question, Derry. I didn't even know, to be honest, full disclosure, I didn't know they were in the tournament. But lo and behold, somebody told me on Wednesday that they actually did get selected in the field of 64. They played a tough McNeese State team that I thought was going to make some waves in the tourney. They didn't, so they took care of business. But bingo, as we suggested, they will not go very far in this tournament. They're watching the audible angle from home tonight, and I'm glad they are. Overrated junk.
Druzy, what impressed you most about Vanderbilt?
Diego Pavia's mom.
Yes!
All right. That's a good answer. Nothing against the kids from Vanderbilt. this will be the last time we talk about them, possibly ever. The biggest question on Vanderbilt, some of the fans were asking, what's the problem with Vanderbilt? The problem is they seem to just be irremovable, like all SEC teams. They could not fall out of the rankings, out of the top. And maybe we don't care about the rankings anyway because it's fake news media, but what did they have to do other than stink to not be in the rankings? And I'm not a Badger fan, but when you compared the resumes, the Badgers were they in the top 25 for like 7 days or something? They lose one game, they're back out. Vanderbilt loses 3 out of 4, and it's like, well, they moved up. We'd made that joke about UConn when they lost to our friends at, was it Georgetown? Somebody beat UConn late, and we thought, well, they'll probably move them up in the rankings. Congratulations on the loss, but that had something. Marquette, yes, Marquette. My bad. They lost to Marquette, and swear to God, there were voters that probably moved them up in the rankings for losing to Marquette.
They're 2-seed.
They're a 2-seed, and they couldn't beat Marquette or St. John's. As we wrap it up, Irby, let's just say if Arizona gets past Utah State, which is very much unlikely, still possible, is Arkansas a true threat to Arizona in the Sweet 16? And will they take us to the promised land?
100%. I love that. I do believe 100%, Dilly, that they are a threat to Arizona. They didn't want to see that team. They would have rather see Wisconsin. And this is the only reason why. That Arkansas team can shoot the 3. That's where Arizona will struggle because they will not make enough 2s to keep up with Acuff and the Arizona Razorbacks with the 3s. That is an Arkansas leaning game, even as a 4-seed over a 1-seed. I like them.
Druzy, does Arizona have enough big dudes to contend with Patrick Ewing's nephew and Richardson?
They do. They got Karchenkov. They've got Cole Pete. They've got enough size. I don't know about this big dude thing, but I think Arkansas absolutely has a chance if Arizona gets by, because I'm thinking either Burries or Bradley's going to have to guard Acuff, and that is a full-time job. So how much do they get taken out of their offense, and how much does that disrupt Arizona? So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And I feel like, and we've just touched on this in the last 5 minutes, Arkansas's supporting cast feels like they probably match up fairly well against Arizona. And so looking forward to it. Should be a great game if it does indeed go that way.
Keep your eye on Florida, guys. Keep your eye on Florida.
Yes. Lots of stuff happening.
Florida up 3. Let's wrap this up. Any final thoughts? I'll give you my final thought first. I've noticed this a couple episodes there. I got one little stretch of red beard that's just hanging on in the sea of white. It's kind of getting to that point of, do I just color it all white or do I go real dark red? Do I bring back full red? It just looks weird if I turn my head this way. It's like, does this guy have a weird scar? There's no scar or anything weird. To the ladies at the pizza joint and bar that saw me earlier today, that it's just my red facial hair. Hold on. Irby, give us a wrap.
Really looking forward to our episode here next week, Dilly. There is going to be some nice matchups in this Sweet 16. As advertised, this is a very tight NCAA tournament. Can't wait to do some exciting previews for these. Tune in middle of the week. Gonna be fun. Sweet 16 is very competitive.
Druzy, final word.
Yeah, the first 4 days of the NCAA tournament, like we talked about last week, some of the greatest 4 days in sports. I feel like it delivered. Was maybe a little chalky, but there were still some great finishes. Kentucky Santa Clara was a crazy, one of the more iconic finishes we've seen in recent years. But to Irby's point, it is setting up some pretty heavyweight matchups for the Sweet 16 that I can't wait for. So even though it's a little chalky, maybe less Cinderellas, I think it sets up for an even better Sweet 16 where you do have these conference powerhouses going against each other already in the Sweet 16. So it ought to be great.
I think we have the seal is dealed. The deal is sealed. The Cinderella of the nation, as the lowest seed remaining, is going to be our friends, the Texas Longhorns. Get ready to have some fun watching that matchup because it's Purdue is Purdon't. They lucked their way in. They lost to Wisconsin at the end of the year. We don't even know why they're Big Ten tournament run. Big Ten was so good they were resting. All their teams were resting before the big tournament. See you soon, boys.
See you, boys.